Okay, well, the tweet about this event has gone out, so I think that's a good time to start. Well, firstly, Joe, welcome to our first ever Realignment Lincoln Network crossover event. We're happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you, Joe.
So, Joe, obviously, for those who haven't heard of you in the attendee set here, you are at 8VC, a venture capital firm in San Francisco. You co-founded, among other things, Palantir and a couple other companies. But the reason I wanted to talk with you today is obviously your provocative op-ed that you put in the Washington Post. Yeah, surprise, surprise, arguing that the current or ongoing Facebook boycott is an actual force for illiberalism. Quick question, did you write that headline yourself?
It's about courage, I believe it said. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was pretty obsessed with the whole idea that everyone's talking about justice and injustice right now, which injustice is a very important classical virtue, but in order to achieve justice, you also have to have courage, another one of the classical virtues, and I don't see a lot of courage in today's society.
So, I mean, Joe, I think one of the things we wanted to pick up on is that you were a prominent voice out of Silicon Valley who came out against this boycott, and you used a very specific term here, which was illiberalism. But you know, before we even dive into the definition of terms, I know you're somebody who's very well read in the classics. What was the situation? Let's just lay it out for the audience that felt you compelled in order to write this op-ed and really make some waves in the debate around free speech and technology.
Definitely. Well, you know, it's funny because everyone thinks everyone in Silicon Valley is liberal, and I wish that was the case. I consider myself to be a classical liberal in the original definition, and it is actually becoming a very illiberal place. And more than becoming illiberal, a lot of this, you know, there's this new culture that's emerging. I think the right way to think about it is moral culture, right? So I think this whole set of, like, we used to have an honor culture, and then we moved into it's more of a dignity culture. We don't do duels anymore. We let the legal system work things out. And there seems to be this whole new culture that's emerging, which is some sort of social justice or victimhood culture. And this culture just completely losing the lessons from a lot of our kind of our liberal past, frankly. It's an illiberal culture. It doesn't really understand, and I don't think kids are taught anymore in the last 30 years. You know, used to be you learned Western civilization as a history if you were part of the class of the elite in the West. And I think it was in the 1980s that Jesse Jackson brought everyone to Stanford, and they chanted, hey, hey, ho, ho, Western Civ has got to go. And they just said, you can't teach these things anymore. And it's no surprise, 30 years later, we're no longer teaching about what it is to be liberal. We no longer have a truly classically liberal education. And we no longer see the debates of our history from the last few thousand years. And so we have these new cultures emerging that are illiberal and that are missing the whole point on how liberal culture is supposed to work. And, you know, personally, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing tons of people around me who disagree with the boycott, who disagree with its clear aims. I don't personally love Facebook. I think there's problems with Facebook and social media we could talk about. But if you actually look at the people leading the boycott, you look at some of what they're insisting on, like, they're just very naive about censorship and about free speech. And it's not even the people who agree with them. I have friends who run companies who signed on to this, and they said, yeah, Joe, my HR, my marketing people, it was important to them, and I don't really care, and it looks good for us, and we're kind of annoyed at Facebook for how much we spend on it. So I kind of went along with it because it doesn't really matter to me. And there's a lot of other people saying, you know, it's going to be a big fight if I go against this, and it's a good way to virtue signal. And there's all these things happening in our country, and I want to be on the side of virtue signaling and be part of it and be part of the positive movement. And otherwise, I might get attacked, and I don't want to be attacked. So it's frankly a lot of people who are cowards, and a lot of people who don't seem to care enough about the values that built our civilization. And just everyone's going along with it. And I was kind of watching and waiting, like, when are people going to speak up and explain how ridiculous this is? And no one did. It was a week into it. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to say something.
So, Joe, you did everything we wanted in terms of being provocative early. I don't hold this position, but I want to push back from a devil's advocate perspective.
Sure.
You're talking about how an issue is that, you know, up until, you know, the 1980s, there were these strong classical liberal educations. The people at Stanford, Yale, Harvard, et cetera, really knew what they were talking about here. People who are against this sort of perspective that I think you, Sagar, and I all share say that what we're really just mad about is that new people are in the conversation, right? Because, yeah, it was true. Like, Stanford used to matter a whole lot more when it came to sort of setting these terms of debate. But, like, could it just be that we are just angry that the people, the broad mass of our politic, are just not engaging in these same debates that we used to?
You know, it's definitely a positive for society that we're no longer run by WASPs. My dad's side is Catholic, my mom's side is Jewish, and if you go back 2 generations, obviously it wasn't as bad as other minorities, but we didn't have it very well either. We definitely weren't part of these conversations. I'm not arguing to have the WASP be in charge again from the 50s. But that said, there was something really healthy for a civilization to have shared values, and that we debate, and that we'd see the debates, understand how they evolved. If you look, I mean, I'm not saying Rome was a wonderful place. There's lots of moral faults with Rome, but it was very healthy for Roman civilization to have everyone study some of the same people for literally several hundred years. And that kind of kept society strong. It kept society on the same page. And if you don't study these people, you don't have those debates, that's a problem. And I'm not saying we should only study these people. I think it's great that we have a lot more diversity of thought. But it's not that we have the diversity of thought, it's that we're literally not even studying these at all. These kids today are not aware, adults today are not aware of the kind of habitat of Western culture and our intellectual heritage. And that just terrifies me, because if you throw that out entirely, then you're throwing out everything positive about our culture. And a lot of people are happy with that. They say, oh, the West is terrible. I think they're missing a lot of things. If you say the West is terrible, I think there's a lot of things that make America exceptional in a positive way. And if we're no longer acknowledging that, I mean, that really concerns me.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, Joe. One thing that you did say I thought was really interesting was you were talking about the apolitical actors within companies, the CEOs, people who are your friends, who were then approached by HR, their marketing people, and they're like, hey, this is actually good for my brand. So this is what I think the most pernicious element of so much of this is that by tying it to making it look like a good PR move, this is how agendas really march through societies, if you will, right? Yeah. And you're also somebody who sits on the board of a lot of companies. You're involved with much of this. As somebody who, actually has to have, may have reputational damage from standing for something like this, how is it that we could create and reform the environment such that aligning, being for free speech, being for a more liberal society, or like classically liberal society, is also good for American business? Because I don't think that's the case right now.
Well, I think it is in some ways, right? I think there's a lot of people on the far left who've spent a lot of time trying to take over important institutions in our society. This is one of those things that you start sounding crazy if you talk about it until you actually dig in and learn more. But people like me who have a certain amount of talents and have my views, I spend time building things, right? I've helped build like 15 companies. I helped invest in hundreds more. I help them. And I'm really busy doing that. I don't have time to go figure out how to put people into positions and kind of spend years and decades conquering institutions. But a lot of the people on the far left do. This is what's happened in our society is they have very successfully put themselves into senior places in a lot of institutions, whether we're talking about universities, whether we're talking about media. And when they get in charge, or even this is true of a lot of big, HR departments and corporations, when they get in charge of these departments, they hire more of the same. They're very much, it's like guild hiring. It's like Stanford recently put out this thing like, due to everything going on in our country, we have to make 10 more special diversity hires, teaching everyone how to be woke. And it's like they're just bringing people in on the far left underneath them, basically, to kind of reinforce their values. And they're very good at that. And so I think, unfortunately, I don't really want to, I like focusing on positive some things, but there is an aspect of the culture war here where if you do have certain values and you're not fighting to bring in people with your values, and they are fighting to bring in people with their values, they're going to control these institutions over time. And these institutions are powerful. That said, these institutions don't yet control our society fully. And we should recognize we can speak up, we can have other views, and we can succeed. It's easier for me to do that as somebody who's very successful. Whenever I see someone doing that courageously, though, and thoughtfully, and that biases me to be excited about that person. And I'll be honest, I had a lot of people reach out to me who are a lot more successful than I am, who loved my article and wanted to meet me after that. So I think it is a positive thing to signal and to stand up for our values. And I do think we have to support people who share these values.
So I have a question dialing on the business part of this. I think it's very fascinating. Part of what's driving these things, though, if we're let's put on our Marxist hats, right? Marxists would argue that corporations, these corporations are getting woke not because they're run by magnanimous people, but because these things are better for the bottom line, right? I think of when Nike put Kaepernick in front of everything, their stock jumped. Why is this phenomenon happening? Because what SJW is also like, not even just SJW, but center left people argue is that look, the market is rewarding these things. People want brands that are woke. People want brands that are leaning into these sort of things. So what's happening in the market that is rewarding people on a business side for these things?
I don't know if people necessarily want brands that are woke. There's definitely some percentage of people that do. There's definitely, whether it's 5 or 10 or 20% of society, they're excited about it. I think that the issue is that a big part of this, like, new, whatever you're going to call this, social justice, victimhood culture, a big part of it is saying all society is unjust. And there's a lot of rituals that go along with that. And one of the rituals is checking people's privilege and calling them out and attacking them. And they're very good at all doing this in a very compelling and scary way. And so they've managed to kind of shift the Overton window in their direction by being a lot more aggressive on these call outs. And a lot of people in big institutions, I mean, institutions are naturally risk adverse. You get to the top by not being attacked, by not having something that gets you in big trouble. And so a lot of these people, for their career, their job is to be risk averse and climb these places. And so in these big institutions, it makes sense that they're just going to be really careful to be friends with the woke people and to be more on their side. And so I think you're just seeing, like, it's a safer choice. It's the less courageous choice, even if you disagree with it, to kind of go along with it. And therefore, a lot of big institutions are going to virtue signal in this way, even if people running it don't agree. Because why take that risk? Why become a target for these people who are very good at targeting and taking people down?
See, that's the part that I find the most interesting about what you said earlier, which is, you're like, well, I spend my time building things. Like, I don't have time to plot, this strategy kind of going forward. And the other thing is, it's not even necessarily plotted. It's like an ideology that fuels itself. And it's like you said, which is that once you have somebody in a position of power and they start to bring people in, then by and large, that becomes a culture that's inculcated. And if you don't actively fight against it, then that becomes a default. And that kind of brings me to Facebook kind of itself, right? Which is that Facebook itself has been, I wouldn't say, consistent. I think that they have been, by far, Zuckerberg in particular, the most forward leaning towards at least a more free speech friendly ideology, particularly in saying, no, we are not fact checking political ads, knowing exactly where that comes from. Could you talk about, just as somebody in the business community, what the immense pressure that he is facing both internally and externally in that culture? Because I mean, some of the people watching this are, from Washington, D.C. It's not necessarily, the most controversial thing, but they recognize something's going on in the culture. I don't think people appreciate how courageous what he is doing actually is.
Yeah, people, that's a great point. Zuck's in a very funny situation. People on both sides assume that their side is like the one that should be righteously angry at him, and that he's kind of in with the other side. And so, like, a lot of conservatives just are like just furious at Facebook, and at least they were before this whole thing. And there's all these things they think it's like these like liberal, like, left people out in the valley, and then meanwhile the far left thinks he's in with the right, and it's just both. There's a lot of issues on both sides, but yet everyone really is demanding like, you have to go along with our social justice culture. You have to basically censor all these things. It's not right not to censor them, because people honestly don't understand the core ideas of free speech. They think it's possible to just do like some kind of fact checking, and don't realize how kind of censorship evolves from that, and how all the censorship is inherently political. This is something I think a lot of people just get very, very wrong, is that, like, censorship is political. Like, human nature is like Aristotle, man is a political animal. It's basically impossible to start to censor what's true or not. Like, if you're on the left and you're censoring what's true or not, you're going to be censoring the stuff on the far right. And if you're on the right and you're censoring what's true or not, you're going to be censoring the stuff on the far left. There's all sorts of complete nonsense. I mean, this is just like a thing I try to tell people. Back in the old days, our very first democracy, Athens had a rule that if you started to speak up and started to say that it'd be good for the country to take wealth from the very rich and just take away from them and give it to everybody else, you would be banned from Athens, because they thought that democracy would not work and would be really unhealthy because people just tried to vote to steal money from the rich people. They said that's the whole point of democracy breaks if you do that. And so literally you would be kicked out of Athens for advocating for socialism. I'm not advocating to kick Bernie Sanders and AOC out of America or to censor them. However, I think it is a very reasonable view that it's really dangerous. These are really bad policies, and I see where they were coming from. And you just have to realize, whoever gets in charge, there's different things you can censor, and they're dangerous to censor either way. And I can go, and I don't know if people interested, like, I think it's crazy. I don't know if you're following some of this stuff with Kendi and anti-racism and stuff.
Yes, yeah, we are.
So it's like, I just read his book because I kind of want to know what's going on. And when you read the book, there are some things that get you really pissed off with racist white people. And there's like stuff, there's obviously stuff that's racist and that's messed up in our society. And it's all of our jobs to fix that. I think the people who say there's no more racism, I totally disagree with that. However, he defines these frameworks that are just terrifying me, because he'll define 3 types of people: segregationists, assimilationists, and anti-racists. And segregationist was kind of the default view in the 19th century, which is that we're all so different, we each have to be apart. And it's based on this very racist viewpoint of the world, that people are fundamentally different. And I think it's very bad, I agree. But assimilationist, he says that anyone who says anything at all about culture, is the culture is being different. Like if you say that there's not enough black fathers, or if you say like anything at all, to assault the culture, you say education should be more highly valued in these communities, that is a racist view according to him as well. You can't have any critique of the culture at all, and which to me is insane. I think this is moral relativism. He says you're racist if you say anything at all. So I agree that some things are a problem because of race, because of racism, and some things are a problem because of culture, and there's a combination of these things, and I think you need to be able to talk about them with all cultures. I think all cultures have different things that are strengths and weaknesses, and he says that's just complete racist. You can't do that at all, and all these companies are going around now saying we're anti-racist companies, and by the definition of what Kennedy's putting out, which basically means you're no longer allowed to say anything about cultures, or else you have to kick that person out. You can imagine social media companies saying we're going to be anti-racist and we're going to censor anything that's not anti-racist, and suddenly we just can't have this nuanced conversation anymore. And it's just terrifying to me.
Can we let's Sagar hinted at this earlier, but let's define some terms, right? Because I think defining censor is important, right? Because, and I think this is why this is such a dangerous debate, because I think what makes a lot of these things insidious is that there's like a grain of truth that things sort of come in. So for example, there are people on Facebook and Twitter who say horrible, despicable things. And if we're talking about the public square, the language you use, they're people that I don't think should be, I wouldn't want them speaking in front of my house saying things that they sort of
say. You block them, you wouldn't listen to them. Right.
Yeah. So what is, so for example, would you think, let's just do some case studies here, Sagar, I know you have some too. So for example, if when Facebook bans people for using like anti-Semitic or racist language, is that censorship?
That's a form of censorship. It's a form of censorship for sure.
And how do you think that type of speech that we can all agree on this call obviously is bad? How should platforms that are trying to serve as public squares police or handle or accommodate the existence thereof?
I think it's a good question. There's definitely levels. I think the fact that we're each able to block people and not listen to them on these platforms is probably good enough. I think that there are funny jokes that are racist against Jews, and I'm a Jew, and if someone wants to make one of those, maybe it was made for a certain purpose where they're making fun of something else. Like, I think that should be fine. I mean, I'll make Jewish jokes sometimes as a Jew, and not because I'm anti-Semitic, but because there are some funny ones. If people want to say that, and maybe that offends some people, but I don't think that should be censored. I think people should use their judgment. But I think it's the stuff that's illegal, in my opinion, should be censored. I think. I'm on the board of Thorn. We had a meeting this morning. We helped stop child trafficking. We identify child abuse images. We get people to take them down. We find who put them up and go help save kids. Like that stuff, I think, is like, that's a matter of legality, and we should definitely censor child abuse images. There's probably a few other things, but in general, I think you should have open, free speech, and people should use their judgment about who they want to listen to or not. That's my take on it.
I like how you delineated between sort of speak, because the point is we're talking about free speech here. We're not talking about child pornography. We're not talking about like violent images. We're not talking about crimes. We're talking about things that under the First Amendment are legal in other squares. So just a quick follow-up, and I'm just curious what you think about this. What do we do? So I like your articulation of blocking people who are doing X, Y, or Z. But what happens if that sort of like, let's say like anti-Semitism like extends towards harassment, right? So like, let's say that like, Louis Farrakhan, like, so let's mix up the racial categories here. Like, let's say there's like this rabidly anti-Semitic campaign by Nation of Islam people against Jews. So like, yes, like obviously you can like block a person, but there's this like cascading and organized set of targeted harassment there.
I mean, this sounds like what's happening by a lot of kind of Bernie bros to billionaires. When I speak up on something on Twitter, I will have hundreds of nasty notes. And some people will say, bro, the gas is going to leak in your house. And they'll say, like, they'll literally do things to like imply they're threatening you and your family. And of course, they're not censored at all for that. And so you got to be really careful, because it's really easy to censor things for things you agree with. But then if I'm kind of on the far left, of course, it's your fault for being an outspoken billionaire. You deserve to be threatened by lots of people. And it probably is the case when people threaten violence and harass. That probably should be against the rules. I think threatening violence is different than free speech. Mm-hmm. But we just got to be really, really careful, because it's really easy to label one thing as not okay and another thing is okay because it happens to adhere to your political views. And I think censorship is just so dangerous because you always end up getting these points of view on it if you're not careful.
Joe, I have an interesting question here, which is that the scenario you laid out about anti-racism, pervading institutions, ideology, I 100% agree. It's something that I hear from a lot of young conservatives kind of here in DC as to their fear of what the end state will look like at Twitter, at Facebook.
Yeah, stopping nuanced conversation about important things. Exactly.
Right. But that comes to the question of what do we do about it? Because this is where I think your more libertarian views on this definitely clash with them, because there's a growing consensus on the right that, look, Facebook, Twitter, Google, all these other companies, they are completely, they're indoctrinated with this ideology. The only institution that can save us from future censorship and a domination of the conversation
as a government
in an increasingly online world is the government. So
this to me is
exactly, if you want to live in, go ahead.
This is like the same mistake they're making with industrial policy too. It's the same the idea that because we're in charge, we don't need freedom anymore and we could just say what's right. It's like the whole point of America in our government and of the way liberty works is that you assume someone you don't like is in charge of the power. You don't create power because you control it. That's not the point of our country. You always have checks on power, and you only create power assuming the people you don't like are going to be controlling it. So whatever these young conservatives want to create, they need the whole point of America is they need to assume somebody like AOC will at some point be in charge of that power, and do not create it if you don't want AOC in charge of it, and vice versa. It's like that's the whole point. If you should assume someone much worse than Trump, if you're on the left, is going to have this power you're creating, is going to use it for whatever they want to do. And if we don't make that assumption, that's how we get to a really terrible, dangerous future where we're imposing things we don't want to be imposing, because that's going to happen. The pendulum's going to swing. And the whole point is you limit that power. So I think it's just a huge, dangerous mistake for the government to get involved here. And frankly, it's not their job. And, if we should start working to build alternatives to these companies if we don't like them. We should lobby these companies and try to push them to do things. As much as I disagree with a boycott, there's nothing fundamentally un-American about getting together and trying to push for your views and convincing companies to help you do that. I think both sides have a right to do that.
So this is another interesting point you just made, because I hear the just build your own competitor from people all the time, except you're somebody who actually could do that. Because the most common critique or the response is, well, that's completely impossible. These companies are just too big. They have a near monopoly on online communication. The internet naturally selects, so to speak, for monopolies, as in they only want one search engine, one social media, etc. So what would that look like in practice as somebody actually in the industry?
Well, it is very hard to build your own company. The way you'd be able to build your own company is if these platforms were bad enough that enough people cared. This is how markets work. Markets are awesome. Markets, if you actually have enough people who really care, who would rather use your platform. And listen, Dave Rubin's building a good one called Locals that I think is pretty cool. I heard Parlay is doing okay. There's different things going on out there that are alternatives. I'll be honest, these alternatives are not going to grow really quickly unless Facebook and Twitter make a lot bigger mistakes, because guess what? I still use Facebook and I still use Twitter, and I don't agree with everything that goes on there, but they're definitely not censoring most of the people I agree with right now. If they started to, I would definitely leave and protest. If they haven't gotten to the point where it's worth leaving them. I mean, even Dave Rubin, who's building Locals, which is great and is a good community, is also on Twitter, And so it's like the market's really powerful. If these things screw up enough, then we will leave. But they're actually kind of forced not to go as far left as they'd like because of the market, which is a great thing.
So this is, Joe, I think that's fascinating. I like what you're implicitly suggesting, which is that we would know if Facebook and Twitter were unusable for conservatives. There would be a market mechanism for that.
There'd be a million of us on something else. Right. Exactly.
So here's the question though. What if there's massive market failure, right? So for example, right, here's something the government can do. Part of the reason why I don't really use Facebook anymore, but a part of the reason why I don't leave Facebook is I can't take my friends list with me, right? I can't take I can't take the things that are there with me. I can't easily save my messages. Something the government could do, or something that companies could do that would make this more possible, is they could make it easier to port your sort of content between different platforms.
Totally. So Balaji, who's a thoughtful person in the liberty movement, if you look at he tweets a lot, and he tweeted something out quite a while ago where he gave a bounty for someone to build a program that would let you take all of your stuff off of Twitter, and he had a bunch of people competing for it, and I believe he got a solution to that. So so the market already did kind of come up with that. I think that's a great point. So he did that with Twitter. And I think that is possibly a fair point. Is there's certain types of things governments can do to allow people to take their own information and bring it places. I want to be very careful with how we do these things. I actually agree in healthcare. It's a great example. I think you should have a right to your own healthcare data through an API, because that does promote a functioning market, and it does kind of go against some of the kind of big trusts that are very crony. So I think that's fair. I want to be careful. I don't think you should be able to force people to delete data. I disagree with that. I think the right to be forgotten in Europe is a right to go into someone else's database and try to make them delete things. I think that's wrong. I think that's anti-liberty. But I agree with you on some kind of pro-market things here.
So this is where I find it really fascinating, because it's about power, really, which is how a lot of people are thinking about it. And I guess if we're trying to balance a majoritarian society, I mean, you made the point is that conservatives have to act as if AOC is already in charge.
We lose if we focus on power, right? The far left thinks everything should be about power. They should definitely, that's the whole, this is like the whole difference. The far left is like pushing for power, and they think everything else is bullshit, and just whoever's in charge is in charge, and that's how the world works. And one group imposes on another, and the other group imposes on them. And I think if we're going to fight for the American idea, if we're going to fight for like the core of who we are as a country, it's not about power. It's about values and principles. And so we have to keep it there, because if we don't, we're lost.
So quick pushback. I know you're more on the libertarian side, so I don't want to sort of put the whole conservative movement since the 50s on your back, right? But so just assume like that. So you could say that the reason why the right has basically lost every broad fight over the past 50 years is that it doesn't care about power. The right has lost the courts in terms of the outcomes it wants. The reason why the right has lost every single culture war battle, but it's gotten into the reason why economic policy has moved inextricably towards the left is because there's a disinterest in power. So I just find the argument about, I feel as if I just feel as if the concern right now isn't that the right cares about power too much. It's that the right doesn't care about power at all.
No. I think in general, to do politics effectively, you have to care about power in that way you're saying. I think that's fair. There's a battle going on, and if you're not fighting the battle, you're going to lose the battle. But I think the goal of winning the political battle should be to reinforce our values and principles, not to like capture government power and then use it in ways that create precedents that are very dangerous.
The only, I guess what my pushback would be is if, Donald Trump is president, the Republicans control the Senate, and you're saying, we have to act as if AOC is in power. But if you look at anti-racist ideology that's pervading Silicon Valley institutions, and you look at our higher echelons of culture, you look at Johnson & Johnson, many of these other companies, Fortune 500 companies, which are pulling advertising off Facebook, aren't we operationally living in a world where she is in power already?
No, there's not that many Fortune 500 companies pulling advertising off Facebook. We'll see the numbers for Q3, but I think there's a lot of people nodding because they're afraid to push back on this kind of popular noise versus the actual business consequences. I don't believe the advertising went down very much in costs at all. I think it was very negligible. It's my understanding. So I think the noise and the pomp and circumstance is a little bit more on the left. But I don't think the majority of people feel this way. I think the majority of people have forgotten how to stand up and speak for our values and speak for our principles. And listen, of course, you control the Senate, you control the presidency. You should put in people who reflect our values. And Leonard Leo, who runs the Federal Society, or did for a long time during this administration, he was helping run the judges, and I think he did an amazing job. He picked a lot of people who were deep, principled constitutionalists. Like we were not putting in, and thank God, in my opinion, we were not putting in a bunch of crazy people who were trying to legislate things on the right through the courts. We were putting in people who believe in protecting the Constitution and believe the court's job is not to legislate. And I'm really glad we did that. And I think it's going to protect us for a few decades. But I mean, the goal of being in power and the goal in general has to be to teach people about the values of America and about how this country is going to be a functional place for hundreds of years to come. And it should not be to start engaging and creating precedents in these kind of food fights that are against the spirit of how our country is supposed to work. That's my take.
So before we move on to the other sort of side of the liberalism debate, I just want to ask, why did you publish this in the Washington Post? Because just for setup purposes, right? If we're all friends of biology here, there's a certain part of Silicon Valley, very online, very on Twitter, who sort of thinks all these legacy newspapers don't matter. You should use your own Substack. You have a Medium page. So why did you choose to put it in the Washington Post? What was your thinking there?
Well, I think the Post and the Journal are both still very important and read by a lot of people. And I wanted this to be something that was discussed and seen by moderates around Washington. And I wanted to be seen by enough people that would give them kind of the backbone to speak up and say what's right too. And I think by putting it somewhere it's considered as mainstream and considered not to really be on the right, I think it was a healthier place for the message to be heard by a lot of people on the moderate left.
I think that's so fascinating, just the dynamic, because I've noticed this kind of as an outside observer. Is you're right, a lot of Washington, as you know, is in-group signaling. Like, it's in the Washington Post, which means it matters. Whereas you post something on your Medium page, like even though you could get 10 times more eyeballs on your Medium page than you could on the Post, it kind of just speaks to how exactly and what incentives that they respond to you. Do you think that it's possible to change that? Because I don't, in this way, it's an inefficient market.
I think it's about creating new brands. Brands are very powerful and brands matter, and we're not going to not have brands in 10 or 20 years. And so, I've been looking a lot at building something called the American Optimist that is going to, talk about these things and hopefully teach people things. And hopefully I can make that a brand. And maybe in 10 years, that becomes a brand that a lot of people listen to and care about in tech and policy, because those are the areas it's going to focus on. So, but I think all of us have to build our own brands, or else we have to work together to build brands. And I don't think you could just do things on Medium. People talk about them as much.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's counterintuitive. So, and you keep saying things that are interesting. So I'm going to keep going with this. A lot of the work that you've done in your VC career and pre-VC career has been around government, right? So that's OpenGov, Palantir, all these sorts of things. You were someone who I think engaged a lot in sort of the post 2016 DC. This relates to Sagar's Washington Post point. Has the last 4 years changed how you think about government and how you should advocate and how these things work?
It's probably not very smart for me to have spent as much time building in government. I've made a lot more money on the non-government stuff. Government, government's fun for a couple reasons. From a business perspective, it's fun to go places where there's like a really big gap. Like, here's how it is now, and here's how it could be if they were more confident in doing things correctly. And so there's all these processes in government, whether it's the regulatory state, whether it's their budgeting and reporting, whether it's how they're using data for a common operating picture for COVID. There's just like the way they're going to do it otherwise is just so bad that it's like really fun as a business person with competent tech people to come in, and you're just 10 times better than anything else they have an option to do. And that's like a good sale. But despite that, it's just government's so hard and so slow and so frustrating and drives you insane. But it's good to be in areas where you're much better. And then, really from a mission driven perspective, which is at this point, once you already have some success, you want to work on things that you really feel are doing something important. And, the mission of fixing government, if a lot of people who want to be philanthropic work on healthcare and education, and I do those areas as well. But, government's just like such a big thing because there's just the biggest gaps in the world versus how it should work. And fixing government fixes healthcare, it fixes education, it fixes everything about society, right? It's like a fundamental thing. So yeah, no, I really enjoy like the mission and trying to get it there. I definitely have learned, government, I used to just assume everyone was probably pretty stupid I'd have to deal with. Maybe that's really obnoxious to say, but that was kind of the default.
Thanks for being honest.
Yeah, that was the kind of default.
You're not wrong.
Well, no, here's the thing. There are some really stupid and annoying bureaucrats, but there are some really competent people there too. Almost every type of situation I've gone into, with only a few exceptions of government, is you'll have really competent, really well-meaning, really smart people working alongside people who are not very good. And so you'll have in government a much higher disparity of talent. Most organizations, there'll be a bunch of superstars or a bunch of pretty good people. And it's just kind of like the strength sets the tone. And for people who are weak, they transition them. You can't really easily transition people in government. And so you tend to have like just a huge disparity. And what that means though, is you can find these allies. You can find people who are really good, who really want the best for their department. And you can persistently work together. And it's fun because you find allies, you build missions, and you start to learn that there's like lots of systemic reasons why things are broken, but despite that, there's still good people who stay there and try to make it work. And so, I'm a lot more optimistic that we can fix government and make it better. If I were to be running an administration, I think civil service reform is the very first thing I would work on. I'm sad Trump never did it. So there's just tons of things to fix to create accountability. But that said, there's still lots of stuff we're able to do now.
Mhm. One thing I want to pick up on, I mean, kind of the theme of the episode is illiberalism. And one of the things you're talking about there is about a form of philanthropy where the business community might be working with the government and improving its processes itself, which implies patriotism. Now, I think that gets to something where I thought you made some pretty big waves last year, in which, took a lot of eyeballs here in DC for people like us who've been focusing kind of on the China problem, which is the de facto, I'll call it a de facto alliance between a lot of big tech firms and the Chinese government, and the lack of patriotism that we see through many of these companies refusing to do business with the US government, or privileging one country or the other, or trying to draw moral relativism between what's happening in Hong Kong and with Uyghur Muslims and protest movement here in the United States. How does your framework, your skepticism of liberalism going towards corporate America and with free speech, apply to a Chinese government alliance with some of the Silicon Valley biggest firms?
Well, this is also a really hard issue. It's kind of similar, like you said, to the other one, because obviously it's not in people's interest to speak up and be attacked, and the CCP is very good at punishing people for doing the wrong things here. But I mean, there's a dialectic. There's definitely still some wisdom to whole engagement philosophy. We obviously made some mistakes in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when we thought we could engage, and we thought that they'd adopt more of these principles. As we kind of had this view that these principles are so obviously correct, they're just a natural consequence of success and of prosperity, is that people will become more liberal, and that's obviously not necessarily the case. I don't buy this whole cultural relativism. There's a lot of people who honestly think that the liberal values of America are just a cultural thing, and that nothing's better or worse. And to me, that's just, a lot of times they say you're being racist if you're attacking China, and it's just a different view of the world. And to me, what's racist is to assume that human dignity is not universal, and to assume that the need to check the power of tyrants is not a universal thing. So I definitely still believe these are universal values, but I don't believe as strongly that these universal values just naturally come about without some sort of pressure and some sort of organization. That said, I think there is a lot of good we've done in the world by engaging with China. There's a lot of people we've helped. There's a lot of mutual wealth we've created, and there's definitely some wisdom. It's not just cutting it off all at once. And so I think being too strong of a hawk here is dangerous as well. And so like, well, on one hand, I'm horrified by the moral positions of the CCP, and there on the other hand, it's a tough question, because you can create a lot of value engaging with them. And so I'm not going to come down and say this is a simple choice, because it's not a simple choice what to do here.
Mm. I think what's interesting there is, I guess, let's bring out the political philosopher within yourself, right? At what point is value just not worth it, right? At what point are we sort of trying to sort of put metrics to things that don't really matter, right? So for example, look, right, selling Nike shoes in China creates a lot of value, right? Turning a blind eye to Hong Kong, or deciding that Taiwan will mostly be fine if it was controlled, that would seem to drive value. So how do you think about those things in that context? Because that's another place where I think you could argue there's a market failure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's definitely a market failure. There's definitely a market failure where, I mean, even like 7-8 years ago, people very senior in China made it clear to me that my businesses were not welcome there. They would never be allowed to be dominant. They're never going to have top data platforms running any part of their government, their finance, their healthcare. It's going to all be internal to China. So they have those tariffs on us. They say we can't, Snapchat can't go there, and yet TikTok can go here. Obviously, something is wrong. A, with the business relationship, and then B, you're right. I think there is a moral compulsion at some point where, like, what happened with Hong Kong seems very, very wrong. I would probably be doing a lot more tit for tat and speaking a lot more to our values more openly and more strongly. But I would be doing that in a way where it wasn't just the U.S. I mean, I think this is where, like, I think people my father's age and Donald Trump's age just get this wrong. Like, their view is so tied to the mid to late 20th century, where the U.S. is like this like unitary actor that's just like the whole world and nothing else matters. And I think if you're going to push back on China in the morally appropriate way, you need to ally with 10 or 15 others. You need to get on board with Japan and with India and with, Vietnam, even Vietnam potentially, although they have their own moral issues, but just all the other powers in the region. And you just say certain things are not acceptable and certain things will not be accepted. And I would probably be doing that in a lot stronger way if I was in charge. Like, if I was running America and talking to Boris Johnson, I'd be saying, let's start another free city like Hong Kong. Let's get a bunch of land nearby. and let's make a deal and let's create a new charter city, first, and invite everyone from Hong Kong to be able to come for free and even give them a little bit of land or something. So there's things like that we should be doing to push back, and we're not at all. So that does bother me.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. And I'm glad that you acknowledged also, because this is something that drives me crazy about kind of the TikTok discourse, which is that, look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's an unfair business relationship, as you said, which is that you, as a person who creates value in businesses, is not able to do business in China.
It's totally asymmetric. And it's the fact that it's one thing to allow it to be asymmetric when they're poor as hell and they're literally people nearly starving and they're developing. Like, I totally get that. Fine. We're just desperately trying to get them to develop and assume they're going to become normal. At this point, they're now emerging as a young adult. You got to hold them to the law, and you got to hold them to what's reasonable, and it's cowardly not to. So that is a big issue. So as much as I guess I'd said it's not straightforward, there are certain things that are straightforward, and it should be made to be symmetric.
Do you think it's straightforward to ban TikTok? Would it be fair for the U.S. government to do that?
I think it would be fair for them to do that. There are smart people who spend a lot more time on that than me, so I don't have a really strong opinion on the right way to do that. It's generally not good to do things without warning, without structure, and without giving people ways around things if possible to make it fair. But yeah, just in general, if people are worried about Facebook and worried about meddling in our election, it's ironic because I think we're on Zoom right now, which says a lot of things through China.
That's true.
But like having a video where what videos people see for tens of millions of our kids controlled by our worst enemy is probably not very smart. It's probably not very smart to let, you probably could make a candidate win or lose on TikTok if you wanted to, if you were China. And if anything, what the crazy thing with TikTok is that it's actually more sharing conservative stuff right now. And I don't know if that's a natural consequence of the media form, because I haven't studied it, or if it's the natural consequence of the strategy because conservatives are in power and can ban it. And if you're Donald Trump and you look at this, that's probably going to help you in the election right now. And so maybe you don't ban it because it helps you in the election, which comes back to our power question again.
Right.
And who the hell knows what TikTok's going to be showing if a far left person's running our country? So it's a fascinating problem. It probably is not good to give China that kind of control of our media.
I'm glad that you brought up the possibility that TikTok, despite the broader geopolitical concerns, could operationally help conservatives. I think it's a part of the debate about social media that's literally always missing, which is that I don't think conservatives who go after Zuckerberg, Twitter is a little different because Twitter is sort of far more left-wing, but yeah. Facebook operationally helps conservatives, right? Because it gets around gatekeepers. If you go back, I love how we're talking about history, but if you go back to the 60s, right, when you only have ABC, NBC, CBS, the predecessor to PBS.
100%. The institutions lock out other views. And I think people who are pro-liberty and pro-free society benefit from a plurality of views because you find new ways of describing and explaining things. And when you have more knowledge, more information, that ends up teaching people why freedom and why bottom-up ideas work, because the whole point is more bottom-up ideas. That is what freedom is. 100%.
Yeah, and I just think the right needs to acknowledge that. So we said the theme of this episode was liberalism, but another theme I'm hearing from you is that the American governing and business elite is full of cowards, right? Like
100%. These people are just scared right now. I mean, because everyone's attacking them and they haven't been given these strong values. These are not strong men and women. These are not the men of the greatest generation. They're not. They're a bunch of wimps.
So, but this is what's interesting though, right? Because this goes back to my other question about what's driving this. So I'd like to hear your thesis about what different, and obviously there's events, right? So the greatest generation, the Great Depression and World War II and sort of rebuilding the world after that. What is driving this? Because it's not as if the men who stormed the beaches of, Normandy were all well-read in the classics, right? It seems like I'm just trying to understand what are the deeper roots of the elite failure?
You'd be surprised. I think a lot of those men were pretty well read in the classics, and if not all of them, a lot of them probably had their peers that were. And I think the culture definitely was at least a little more shared back then. But aside from that, there seems to just be a lot of worry about offense in our culture, and we've gotten really, really careful not to offend people. And I don't know quite where this is coming from. I think it's probably coming from the Marxists who run our education system and how they've kind of framed what you could say and what you can't say. And listen, when we were kids, we would say things like that's gay, and that's probably not very nice. I learned as I got older, and I have a lot of gay friends I work with, and it's okay, you probably shouldn't have been calling something gay in the third grade. That's it's funny, but it's not funny if it hurts someone. So fine, there's no need to hurt people unnecessarily. There's no need to use, offensive terms. At the same time, when something counts as like a microaggression against you, when something offends you a certain way, like what I would tell my kids or what I would tell people who work with me is when you're offended, that's a chance for you to learn like why did that bother you, and what is there inside of you that you can like make sure you fully understand so it doesn't bother you. And like being a victim, being offended is not something to be proud of. Like it's not a good thing that you're offended. That's like a sign of weakness. You need to be so strong that and you know who you are and you know how the world works, that these people can't offend you, because these people, that's because beneath you that would offend you, because it's just stupid, and it's not coming from a place that has any power over you. And at least to me, that would be like the way to deal with it within an honor or dignity culture. We used to say sticks and stones will break my bones, but words never hurt me. I don't think they teach that to kids anymore. I think that's a problem. I think it makes you wimpy. If you say, oh, sticks and stones will break my bones and words will make me scream, cry, and have issues for the next month, then like that's pathetic. You're a wimp. And that's what we should be telling kids. And so I'm sorry, but this whole culture is like teaching them that they are vulnerable, they are going to get hurt, these things are bad for them. And I just think that's silly.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the meta conversation we're also having here is about norms. Like, what are the norms in companies? What are the norms in society, culture? These all get set from the top down. How do you think, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about, with this whole cancel culture debate and the employment kind of thing that you're talking about, which is that how can we marry, better norms with employment, the way that we construct employment? So Balaji, again, a friend of the show and podcast, and I'm sure of all of us, he raised an interesting idea about like a clause in contracts of like a cooling off period for cancellation, as in, if you had said something in the past and you have 90 days, the company has to wait 90 days before they can fire you.
I think that's a great idea to structure things that way. I think that's something we should definitely think about encouraging in our institutions as a new norm that gets created. What's really terrifying about the norms in employment, this is another one of those areas where the left's kind of captured, the very woke left has kind of captured things. Labor law is just insane. I don't know if you've seen these things, but labor law has just gone wacky. Like you can't make someone uncomfortable in the workplace with your views as a leader, or else in California they may be able to like I don't send things out to my full team list right now, because someone got uncomfortable about like a very normal, healthy conversation about things that were going on, because they weren't particularly, they're like a very junior person, not particularly bright person. And so it's like, and these people, and they don't have the context on the fact that there's different views that are respectable on both sides on some of the issues in today's world. And I learned, wow, I'm actually in danger if people are uncomfortable. And it's good. Labor law has been written in a way where they can just go after you. So it is. I think Balaji is right about that, but I think all of us who are running these things need to realize we've kind of given up this area of labor law to the point that's totally insane, and the left is just kind of broken. And you got to be really careful.
See, I think this is interesting, because wouldn't that imply that the law matters and that the people who write the law should care about how law and labor law is structured?
Law definitely matters. Law definitely matters, but the right answer is not to like get conservative Christians, for example, to get in there and to force people to have to, go to church, or, in labor law, or whatever they would have done 100 years ago if the right was in charge 100 years ago on that. The right answer is to get in there and win the battle and put in our principles, which is that government should not be imposing these things on people. At least that's my take on it. I don't disagree that there's important battles. I don't disagree we need to win these battles. I do disagree that we should win them. We should then try to push our values that go beyond liberty, that go to kind of imposing our views on how people should live their lives. To me, that's not right.
See, this is so interesting, because I think what's driving a lot of these fears on the right, because obviously no one knows Saga or I as rabid social conservatives, but we do talk to many. And for them, it's like, we're not debating imposing Christianity on people, right? Like that is a debate 100 years ago. Like we're trying to defend ourselves, right? Like that's where this whole,
and I 100% agree with that. Of course, that is a sign of a movement that is having to defend itself. If it was completely in control, there'd be some people arguing to impose some of these things, and they'd be wrong, right? And so, and I think there are still parts of our country where people are in control and they are arguing to impose these things. And this is, again, whether we're talking about industrial policy or kind of opposing the right's view of censorship to stop the left. Like, I think both of those are really dangerous too.
So let's finish up this with a quick discussion of COVID and where we see the world going, because you've besmirched industrial policy a couple of times during this episode. So we must speak up.
For our brethren.
It's difficult from my perspective, how we can look at the initial inability of this country to produce masks or other critical medical supplies, and then just sort of, it's hard to look at that and then say, no, we don't have enough industrial policy. So I could see a world where like there's too many commissars, right, where there's too many, we're going to do like, Solyndra Part 15. I get that, but that doesn't seem to be the danger that we're in right now.
Well, Solyndra itself was like Part 39 or something, if you looked at all the last 20 years. But there's listen, I think we probably can align on the fact that we both want it to be easier to manufacture things in America. There's actually a renaissance kind of just starting in terms of robotic manufacturing and making things much, much cheaper with a lot more automation that will involve people, but a lot more automation. That's already kind of happening in a fast pace. We would like that to be happening in America. And a big reason it doesn't is thanks to really bad regulations and really bad setups that make it a lot harder to do it here. And I think this comes down to immigration rules. I think this comes down to all sorts of the ways kind of environmental, rules work, and all sorts of ways lots of other regulators work. And I think if we made it easier, if let's do free economic zones even. Like it always annoys me to talk about free economic zones in America because America itself is supposed to be a goddamn free economic zone. That's like the whole point. But you know what? Maybe we need some free economic zones just to get some manufacturing back. And I'm totally aligned on that. There's the mistakes that people make, and the ideas I'm seeing proposed are just so bad to me. And I just want to be really careful. We're not just like throwing money at cronies. Like one of the worst things we could do in our government is give money to cronyism. And I've seen a lot of proposals that's all they would really do in my view. So, but I think we should be aligned that it is important to bring manufacturing back. I believe that freedom would get us there if we did it correctly.
Here's an interesting case, right? Which is Intel. This case just came out. Intel. This is according to Bloomberg. They're outsourcing their jobs. A huge decline for domestic manufacture of semiconductors, which is a long time an American industry, which we led in, critical to national security and more. And
the DoD argument for certain things, Intel doing certain things here, is quite strong. I'm not opposed to the national defense argument that we need to have certain types of things be done here. I think that's the one area where we'll probably agree on industrial policy is like, if we don't have certain things manufactured here, that is very dangerous for wartime. Mm-hmm. And so there are contracts we should be giving out for things on shore for the DoD, because the DoD is going to need these things. So that part makes sense to me. And if that ends up influencing people to do more here, then that's fine with me. So we can align on that.
Makes sense. So on coronavirus broadly, one of the themes that we have here is that coronavirus, much of this is just exposed, kind of all of the bigger, the fraying holes within the economy, within society, within culture, so much more.
A mess. Everyone's unhappy and protesting, et cetera.
Right. So how is this affecting the business environment for you as an investor and as an entrepreneur going forward? Like, what are the holes that you see that you want to try and plug, or opportunities and others that people might be?
It's actually the biggest part of the answer is that a really good investor should be focused on the net present value of their companies based on their value 10, 15, 20 years out. So most of what we're doing, we're building something that's going to be really, really valuable in 10 years. That's the whole point of venture capital. That's what we're doing. And so the question is what the world's going to look like in 2030. I am very worried about the far left in 2030. This is something we think about and debate about a lot. This could completely change the business environment. I am not very worried about COVID-19 in 2030. And so the main question is, how long does it last? And can the valuable businesses get through it? Do they have enough liquidity? Do they have enough resources? Are they positioning themselves well to get through it? Now, of course, the world's not going to be exactly the same in 2023 as it would have been without COVID. And then there are certain things there. Like the biggest impact on my business right now is this massively accelerating the shift to the cloud. People are going to the cloud faster. Because of that, there's all these processes, whether we're talking about healthcare or finance or logistics. There's processes where there's data we have now in the cloud we never had before. So there's lots of really cool businesses you can build you could not have built a couple of years ago. So that's very exciting for us. There's tons of really cool things there that's going to help fix healthcare, help fix these industries. The other thing is that e-commerce, of course, is massively accelerated. I'm an investor, for example, I was the first investor in Wish. Wish is the largest mobile commerce company. It'll probably IPO for well north of 25 billion market cap next year. It would not have been nearly as big, as quickly if we didn't have this situation going on. They've been around for a long time. accelerated a lot more because of this. And therefore, there's lots of logistics things accelerating too. So listen, this is a great time to be a venture investor. I'm slightly guilty because everyone's having a tough year and everything. We're having record quarters in lots of areas. Our hotel technology stuff's not doing well, but like there's certain things that are really bad. But like in general, the dentist stuff did not do well. But in general, there's just like lots of stuff working in the tech world. And your main job as a great tech investor is to be looking 5-10 years ahead and not to get too distracted by what's going on right now. We're trying to avoid things that are COVID specific as investors.
So my last question here is the big debate that I have with people on the right, which sort of, and your answer to this determines whether or not you support President Trump or not, at least in my circles. Do you think it's possible that if Joe Biden resoundingly wins the presidency, America sort of calms down culturally? You sort of see a point where these concerns about sort of the far left and these sort of claims about Facebook in the public square will sort of go away or calm down? Or is this something that's inextricably going to advance no matter what happens in November?
So the far left and the Marxists that are taking over our media, taking over our universities, taking over lots of parts of our society that we need to battle, they are definitely not going away. Full stop, they are not going away. The frustration and embarrassment and political engagement from a lot of the moderate left is probably tied in part to the pandemic, because like there's lots of ways that's going to make you want to go rally and get outside and go crazy. And it's probably tied in part to Donald Trump. And I think these people, I mean, you can go back and read things people have said about Mitt Romney, and you don't know it's Mitt Romney, you assume they're talking about Trump. I mean, these people are always pretty nasty, no matter who's running. I totally agree with that. At the same time, Trump does seem to have a special ability to kind of poke them in a certain way to kind of make some people on the right smile and make them really angry. And then the people on the right smile more. And there's definitely a divisive energy coming from this president. So are things going to go back to normal? No, we're going to have a huge problem with the far left regardless for the next decade. It's something we need to fix and need to figure out. Would things calm down a little bit with Joe Biden? Most likely they calm down a little bit.
Well, very interesting. Joe, we really appreciate you joining us. So interesting. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lagarde. Thanks, Marshall. Good to see you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
Okay.